know if you've ever read Goodnight Moon, but there is a scene in that book where the grandmother is by the crib and she is whispering, "Hush." And that strikes me as kind of a great view of being a grandparent. Now, I know a lot of people are not only whispering hush, but they're raising their grandchildren. And they're getting up in the morning, they're getting them off to school, they're assuming all financial responsibility. Now, this can be a deeply gratifying experience, but also there are certain problems that may be inherent with it. And what I'm going to do here is, first of all, talk a little bit about some practical advice. Second, talk about some legal problems that are engendered when grandparents are raising grandchildren. Third, give you some hints about financial help. And fourth, talk about problems of inheritance. As to the practical tips, there are millions of people in your position, and there are websites. AARP has a website. They have support groups, they have publications, they have all kinds of information to help you raise your grandchildren. The legal aspects, the first thing you have to know, and the most important thing, is that physical custody does not equal legal custody. And that means that even though the child is living with you, you don't have the legal right to consent to certain things. For example, you might take the child to the doctor, and it might be a complicated procedure, and they'll say, "We want the parent to consent to this." Well, you're not the parent, so you can't consent to it. Maybe you'll run into problems at their school for the same reason. Now, most of the time, it will be good if you just have a simple letter, like the one we're going to show you now. I am the parent of Goldilocks. She will be staying with her grandparents, Mama Bear and Papa Bear. They have my permission to make all medical and other decisions for her. And you have the child, the parent sign that and date it and maybe notarize it. And in most situations, that will suffice. And if it doesn't, then you're going to probably have to get legal advice. The major problem, however, with grandparents raising grandchildren deal in dysfunctional families where, say, your 19-year-old daughter has an unwed child. She leaves the child with you and goes off to God knows where. You raise the child 4 or 5 years, and things are going well, and suddenly the daughter returns. It says, "I want my baby back." Because she has legal custody, she can do that. The way to get around that, to be absolutely certain that that can't happen, is to adopt the child. Now, you're going to need a lawyer to help you with that. But if your daughter, if it's the daughter, and the father of the child agree to it, an adoption is relatively easy. If they don't agree to it, then there are other formats that a lawyer can help you with, such as a permanent guardianship. Now, of course, if you adopt the child, then you are the parent of the child, and you have a support obligation, but you can make all the decisions. And if your daughter comes back in 5 years and says, "I want the child back," then it's up to you to make that decision. Do you think it's good for the child to stay with you or to go back with your daughter? It will be your decision and not your daughter's decision, and that can make all the difference. Also, in very bad circumstances where there's a lot of drug abuse or alcoholism or domestic violence, the state can intervene and bring an action to find the kid being dependent, the grandchild being dependent. Now, if the court, that would be a court hearing, and they would do the lawyers, and they would handle all of that. If the child would be held to be dependent, that means that the state would take custody. But then where would they place the child? Likely, if the grandparents are there, they will likely place the child with the grandparents. So that's another alternative. Now, as to financial aspects, check with Social Security. If you've adopted a grandchild, and if you're on Social Security, most likely that grandchild, if the grandchild is under 18 or maybe older than 18 and is disabled, will be able to get their own grant of money each month. Even if you haven't adopted the child, but if they are dependent on you, it may be, under some circumstances, you may be able to get an additional grant from Social Security. So if you are raising your grandchild, talk to Social Security. The other financial benefit might be that you can deduct this child as a dependent on your income tax. And again, you could check with the IRS as to the specific rules. You can also ask them about whether or not you're eligible for what they call the Earned Income Tax Credit. And that's a program for low-income people that aren't making ends meet, and under some circumstances, even if they haven't paid taxes, they will get a tax refund. Now, what about the problem of inheritance? If you're raising your grandchildren and you die without a will, where does your money go to? Where does your property go? Where does your house go? It goes to your children and not your grandchildren. Now, maybe you don't want that to happen. If you don't want that to happen, if you want to take care of your grandchildren and pass over your other children, you got to make a will. And a lawyer can help you do that. And as I will talk about in another segment about trusts, you can put that money, if there is money, into a trust that they can't get until they're 25, or whatever you think is appropriate. Finally, let me just say this. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, and more power to you. And I just hope that you take time in your busy day to someday, sit by the bed and whisper, hush.